Welcome to an introduction to the Sustainable Development Goals. What are the Sustainable Development Goals? Well, before I tell you that, I'm going to take you back a little bit and tell you a story about the beginning of the millennium. In 2000, the UN came up with a set of goals called the Millennium Development Goals. Now, these were 8 targeted goals that were meant to help the people who had the most difficulties on the planet. Now, these goals were supposed to be achieved between the year 2000, the new millennium, and 2015. So what did they do? And I promise you, I will get to the Sustainable Development Goals, but first I'm going to tell you a little bit about the Millennial Development Goals. The Millennium Development Goals focused primarily on the low-income countries in the global south, what people then called developing countries. Now, there were 8 goals, and they focused on reducing poverty and social inclusion, achieving universal primary health care, promoting gender equality, reducing child mortality, reducing maternal mortality, combating HIV and AIDS and tuberculosis, partnerships for the goals, and for creating environmental sustainability. So those were 8 goals. And what did they achieve? Well, in 15 years, they achieved quite a bit. For example, they reduced extreme poverty by 60%. Imagine that. 60% of the world who lived under $1 a day were suddenly in a position where they were no longer living on $1 a day. Maybe not much more, but they had advanced. The reduction of maternal and child mortality, they reduced it by 60%. That means out of 10 children which would have died in the year 2000, 6 of them were alive in 2015. And they also achieved gender parity in secondary school, meaning girls and boys went to school at the same amount by 98%. That's huge. HIV infections under that same period reduced by 40%. In 2014, at the time that the goals were almost due to go out, there were 13.6 million people living on antiretroviral therapy. Now, that is 13.6 million people who would have died but are alive today for their families and for the economy and for the future. Another thing that the Millennium Development Goals focused on was sanitation. Under that 15-year period, 2.1 billion people got access to improved sanitation, something that we, for the most part, take for granted. So the Millennium Development Goals did not reach all of their goals, but they made huge leaps forward, and they made great progress, and they inspired us. It always seems impossible until it is done. And those 8 Millennium Development Goals were very, very ambitious. People thought that they couldn't be done, and they weren't completely met, but the idea of setting goals for development caught wildfire. And soon, that is going to be what we talk about when we talk about the Sustainable Development Goals. But before we do that, I want you to take 5 minutes, and I want you to write down your most outrageous, your craziest, ambitious goal for yourself. And it can be a personal goal, or it can be a professional goal, but I want you to write it down, and I want you to get crazy. What is the wildest dream that you have? Write it down, and come back to me in 5 minutes.